Well, good morning. I guess relationships is what makes it so that I can do this. It was nice to look out across the crowd and see smiling faces and be able to connect with a lot of you. Some of you I know, some of you I don't know, but it is kind of neat as you look at people and you realize, oh, they're all people. They're all like me. They're maybe not as nervous as I am right now, but but they are people too. And I thank you all for being such a nice crowd. Relationships is a topic I love. I enjoy it immensely. I learn a lot from relationships. I love to study how God uses that in my life. So when they mentioned doing relationships, I was like, oh, that's really exciting. But on the other hand, relationships is often done in communication. And it was another thing to actually sit down and have to put all my thoughts together and figure out how to say that in 45 minutes in a concise way that, well, how do you package relationships into 45 minutes? That's just not a super easy thing to do, but it was good. It was good for me to reflect, and I'm looking forward to trying to verbalize this and put it all together. So in thinking of relationships, when I first start down that path and I try to decide where I'm going and where I'm looking, how many of you would go to a cemetery to learn relationships? I actually had a super good lesson at a cemetery on relationships. My sisters and I have a habit of not a habit, but we enjoy stopping at cemeteries and just going through, looking at tombstones, seeing what's written on them. You know, there's a lot of interesting things to learn in cemeteries, from how long somebody lived. A lot of pensive stuff happens, a lot of deep introspect. And anyhow, a lot of deep introspect happens. And we just like to walk through them. You know, we'll be driving down the road and see some old cemetery, and we stop and we get out and we'll go walking through them. And, you know, there's somebody that died really old. There's somebody who died really young. You know, there's probably pain in their life or something. And you just wonder what the people went through. And, you know, here's a beloved father and a list of all their children, or, you know, their accomplishments, the things that are done. And we were meandering through this old cemetery one day, and I got to this tombstone. And all I remember was that it was a lady. I don't remember if she was married. I don't remember anything else except for what it said on her tombstone. And it said, "It's none of your business what I did." We laughed. I called my sisters over and we looked at this thing. I mean, it was etched in a tombstone. and we just laughed. And I thought, you dear, dear lady, if only you knew how you were still making people laugh today. I've told this story. It's been 15 years since I told that story. And, or as I've told, it's been 15 years since I saw the tombstone. And anyhow, I mean, countless people have laughed over that. And it's just neat. I wish I knew the lady. I wish I knew her family. I wish I knew her story. But a few weeks ago, I had mentioned that story again. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, what if she meant it? What if she didn't mean that for funny? Like, what if she wasn't the person I thought, like all these years I thought, oh, she must have been a comical person. Oh, she must have just loved to tease people. Oh, she must have, you know, this must have been something kind of fun. But what if she really meant it? What if she was a cynical old person who lived a very lonely life and died and said, you weren't with me in life? Here's what I have to say to you in death. What if she actually really meant that? What if that's the way she lived her life? It's none of your business what I did. Right there encompasses two completely different kinds of relationships. Contrast that with Acts 9:36. And 39, it says, "Now there was at Joppa a certain disciple named Tabitha, by which interpretation is called Dorcas. This woman was full of good works and alms deeds which she did. And all the widows stood by, weeping, and showing the coats and the garments which Dorcas made while she was with them." We all know that Dorcas was raised from the dead, but she was dead at this point. What would her tombstone have said? She maybe wouldn't have had anything inscribed on her tombstone, but her life would have read something, and something very valuable, and something very, she was committed to relationships. She had people surrounding her, people who loved her, people who missed her. She was gone, and they were like, look at what she's left behind. And I think that would be all of our testimony in the relationships that we build. We want to leave something behind. We want to leave behind a reputation where we've spoken into people's lives, they've spoken into our lives. It's something that happens that changes us. So one thing that happens in relationships, and this is something I love to look at, is the fact that relationships will define us, or help define us anyways. That sounds a little bit like a scary thing, because our identity, our foundational self-definition has to come from Christ, and it has to come from God. But God will use the relationships in our life to help us see who we are, to help us realize if we're the person saying it's none of your business what I did, or help us see if it's the person that's saying, hey, how can I help you? What can I be in your life? What do you need? And how can I help? As far as definitions go, like we've all heard of the stereotypical old maid. None of us want to be the stereotypical old maid, but how did she get that title? Where did that come from? It certainly wasn't by being a Tabitha. It may have been by saying, it's none of your business what I did. We really don't know. Was she grouchy? Was she cynical? We don't know what she was, but we don't want that definition. Although I'm not 100% opposed to when I'm older and I'm single, it is what it is. But I don't want to be the stereotypical old maid either. Anyhow, are we a blessing? Are we crabby? Are we pleasant to be around? Are we a drag? When people talk to us, do we help to lift them up? Or are we constantly the person dragging other people down? Those kind of things we have to be aware of as we relate to other people, and our relationships will help to prove that. It's one of those things we want to take a close look at. It's good for us to look into ourselves. We are the only people we can change. There's not another person we can change. It's only us. By the grace of God, with the help of God, and people, we can change. Relationships will reveal who we are. We might have a preconceived idea of who we think we are. But in actuality, how that works out is going to be revealed in our relationships. They're going to reveal our relationships with God, and how much we trust God, and how much we can rely on God, how much we allow God to change us. In John 4:20, 1 John 4:20, it says, "If a man say, I love God, and hateth his brother, he's a liar. For he that loveth not his brother whom he hath seen, how can he love God whom he hath not seen?" So if we're not building good relationships with the people around us, that does reveal a little bit of what our relationship with God must be like. We have to be honest with ourselves about those things. Relationships will reveal our shortcomings. they'll show us where we need to grow. Sometimes those things are hard to look at, but we need to look at them, and we actually really want to look at them. None of us are perfect. I don't want the pressure of being perfect. I want to be able to grow. I really, really do. And I need the relationships in my life to be able to grow. We all do. They'll also reveal our gifts and how we're using our gifts. Relationships are going to reveal if we're burying our talents. God gives each of us different gifts and different talents. And we use those, hopefully, on relationships. We use them on the people around us. They're not for our own selfish purposes. It was a little bit of an inspiration to me, because sometimes you can feel a lot of the demands on you. And then other times I have to sit back and I have to look and go, okay, so are people demanding a lot of me? Is that what is happening? Or am I refusing to use my talents and use the things that God has given me, the abilities God has given me to serve others? Of course, there's always balance to life. Some people can lose themselves in service too much. Yeah, it's good to find the balance, but it is good to realize that God gave us these talents for a purpose. So why did God choose relationships? Of all things, people. In the creation story, we read that God created us in his image. God is a relational God, and he created us to be relational. We were created to need relationship. And I find that kind of interesting, that it was purposeful. We weren't created like animals. We were created with living souls, with the breath of life. And we were created to need that connection. The other thing I also found very interesting from the creation story was that God said it's not good for man to be alone, and he created woman for the man. All of us are single in here, or most of us anyhow. What does that mean to us? I still say we need relationship. We still need relationship. We have to have it. We were created for it. We live in a fallen world. It's not what it was at creation, where there's not every man doesn't have a woman and every woman doesn't have a man, but we still need relationship. Things turn out different than maybe God intended in the original creation. There are handicaps, there are accidents, there are things that happen, but there are beautiful things that God works through each one of those things. He works amazing, amazing things. It doesn't mean we're less than God's perfect plan, not by any means, because God wants to use it. It just means it's maybe different than we thought it might turn out. But God uses it, and it's important. So at first in creation, of course, everything was very good. It was exactly how it was made to be. There was fellowship with God. There was fellowship one with another. I'm quite sure there was not any strife or bickering or things like that. It was perfect. It was exactly how it was supposed to be. God said it was very good. But there was a fall, and we start to see some things really degrade rapidly. Very quickly we see murder enter, and if that isn't the ultimate of a failed relationship. We see murder, we see dependence, where the Bible mentions that her desire will be to her husband. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, because we're all singles here, and what do we do with that? We see a lot of weakness and a lot of needs start to enter. We see a lot of where relationships start to take a lot more work. The original harmony that was intended for relationships was affected by the fall. It wasn't just weeds. It wasn't just death. There was so much more that the fall affected, and relationships was one of them. We start to see things like Lot and Abraham striving, and Jacob and Esau. There they are, brothers. It should be great, shouldn't it? Family relationships, of all things, should be. If we want good relationships, it should be in our families first, right? Rachel and Leah, there they are, sisters. One's loved and one is not. Tough spot to be. And we start to see a lot of struggle. So how are we, as single ladies, supposed to achieve our relationships that God wants for us? We have no spouse. We have no children. It is really easy for us to avoid uncomfortable relationships. If I don't get along with somebody super well, that's not my closest friend, right? It's super easy for us to do that. Nobody's waking up in the middle of the night on us, throwing up, running fevers, wetting beds. No sheets need to be changed for most of us. I mean, some people are taking care of elderly parents maybe, or helping out with some nieces and nephews. I mean, but generally speaking, across the board, we can pick pretty easy relationships if we want to. We don't necessarily have to live and be challenged by discomfort. We have to work. But as far as some of the relational challenges of a husband and children and things, we don't have that. We decorate our house the way we want to decorate our house. We make our bed in the morning if we want to, and if we don't, we don't. One thing I would say is it is important for us to purpose to build relationships. We cannot leave relationships to happenstance. The people that happen to be in our lives and we can't get away from, are those the only ones we build relationships with? As singles, without the relationship of a spouse and children, we are in need. We are in need of the other relationships that God places around us. We have to be careful not to allow ourselves to hide and become emotionally isolated. That is an easy path to take, especially if you're hurting, especially if you're going through a hard time. It's easy to hide emotionally, and it's probably one of the most important times that we need to make sure that we don't, that we are building relationships, that we are surrounding ourselves with people. Another thing that I kind of realized through my single years is that our relationships a lot of times are revolving doors. People come and go in our lives. I mentioned that to one of the men I work with and talking, I just said it's part of the reason I like to come to things like this. I like to go to Penn Valley is because I like to expand the relationships and the people in my life. I enjoy that. And he said, well, Allison, he said, in our life, he said, nobody's permanent in our life either. And I was like, yeah, but it's a little bit different. I said, unless your wife dies, she will be with you till death. Well, yeah. There is a commitment there. My sister and I, we were tight. We were close. We did so much together. And she got married last November. We had not really anticipated that. We had a house together. We had life together. We had plans together. And all of a sudden, my sister, my closest person on earth, was gone. By choice. She chose it. You know? And I was really, really happy for her. But she was gone. And I had to find ways to continue to grow my life and to continue to say I wanted to be happy for her. I was happy for her. This was a good thing. I wanted this in her life. but I had adjustments to make. And if I didn't have good relationships in my life, if I hadn't surrounded myself with people, it would have been a lot harder. I would have had nowhere to go. If I would have been allowing those people to slowly leach out of my life and be gone, what would I have done? But I strive to purposely fill my life with people and look for new people. There's always new people to meet. There's all kinds of people here today that I have never met before, and that I know, it's like I can see it. I see it in your faces. It's like, oh, this one would be fun to talk to. There's just connection there, even in looking at people. And it would be neat to know each one of your stories and know where you came from and learn from you. In building our relationships, though, we do have to remember to be sensitive to the people around us. There are some people, it's easier for them to share. Some people talk easier than others. Some people, you have to ask questions, and they might just give you a yes or a no answer. That might be all they want to give you. Be sensitive to that as you build those relationships with people. And in relationships, one thing again too, is we need to make sure we're offering, I like to call it a 70 times 7 friendship. Relationships, in building relationships, we open ourselves to vulnerability, and we do open ourselves to hurt. People will disappoint us. We cannot have our confidence in people. Our confidence comes from God, and we have to believe in people's goodwill. Believe that they do want to serve God. Is this a Christian I'm talking to? If it is somebody that is a sincere Christian, and I believe with my heart they are a sincere Christian, maybe something did happen where they disappointed me or hurt me, but I cannot believe they did that intentionally. I cannot believe they woke up in the morning and just said, I'm going to figure out what I can do to hurt Allison today. It's taking a healthy look at that and offering that kind of grace and that kind of forgiveness, and realizing, oh, there might be another side to this story. Oh, there might be something I totally don't understand. Or maybe I did something that caused hurt in them. That happens too. I completely unknowingly, or sometimes out of my own hurt or my own pain or my own insecurity, I might do something. It's unfortunate, but it is part of the sin nature. It is part of why I need relationships, and I need to grow, and I need people to be patient with me, and I need to be patient with them. But I really want to strive to be the person who extends hope and extends forgiveness and tries again and doesn't just give up on people or on relationships. All those relationships are so necessary for our growth. Again, if relationships are not going well, I need to examine myself. I am the only person I can change in this relationship. I might be able to influence somebody else, but I certainly cannot change them. But I can change myself. We need to be aware of the effects of the fall in our life. Are we often in conflict? If we are often finding ourselves in the center of conflict or in relationships that are struggles, we probably need to look at ourselves and figure out why. If the common denominator is me, it might just be me who is the source of the conflict. And I am, once again, you'll hear me say it a lot, but I am the person who can be changed in this. So then later I want to deal with a little bit of the practical ways that God will use relationships in our life. individuals and things like that. But so we are changed by relationships, but we are also necessary for the growth of other people. You don't often think about that, but sometimes just in how, I know I think about it a lot, how each one of you or each one of my friends or each one of the people that I love have influenced me and caused change in me. I hope God is using me in the same way in other people's lives. I hope when I die, it'll be like Tabitha, and it won't just be because of the things that I made or the things that I did, but it will be because I influenced other people for good, because God used me to help them grow. I hope I'm sensitive enough to try and see how I can speak into the life of somebody else. Sensitive enough to listen when I'm communicating with somebody. Am I hearing what they're saying to me, or I'm trying to think of what the next thing is I need to say? Or am I really listening? Super important things. Communication is a really sensitive topic. The ability to listen, to know when to listen, and to know when to talk. That one I could think about, and I could think about and think about for a long time. Everybody needs different things in their life. Some people need more talking. Some people want advice. Some people just want you to listen so that they can talk it through. And it's really, it behooves every one of us and to learn how to do that and to be sensitive to that. If we're trying to help somebody, we need to consider if we're actually being a help or if we're just looking to have an ego boost for ourselves. There can be very selfish motivations for why we help people. We should make sure that we're not undoing the help that we are offering by being selfish, by selfishly looking just to boost our ego or make a good name for ourselves. Those kind of things, we should be more cautious that we're watching out for the other people. So, if we are building good relationships, God will use us to be Christ-like influences in the lives of those around us. That's a pretty incredible thought. I know my weaknesses, I know them all too well. And it's pretty amazing to me to think that God will actually use me to be a Christ-like influence in somebody else's life if I'm working to build good relationships with them. So as far as practical applications go, there are so many people in our life. I mentioned family already. Our family should be our closest people, or generally they're our first people, our moms, our dads, our siblings. God knows our family. He knows exactly where we were born. One thing I always like to remind myself is to be gracious to the people we're the closest to. We know their strengths. We know their strengths so very, very well, but we also know their weaknesses. We know their weaknesses better than most people do. And Satan loves to use that. He loves to use the weakest spots to build divide, to build distrust, and things like that. So we want to be gracious to our family. We also want to remember to be thankful for our family and to remember that God knows exactly where we were born. He knows when we were born into difficult situations, whether we were born into what some might say, I couldn't have asked for a better home. And that's a tremendous blessing. But God will use difficult home lives too. He really will. Let God do the work that He intended by the family He gave you. It came as no surprise what family you were born into. No surprise at all. And church relationships. I'm not from Mennonite background. I spent a lot of years where we didn't have a church. And I know the value of church. I know the value of learning and realizing that if you're too picky or too critical, what are you going to be left with? Nothing. Just nothing. And so I think my heartthrob is love your people. Love them well. Love your leadership. Love your church members. Look for the good. Invest in your church. Invest financially. Invest physically. Invest emotionally. Okay? We all would believe in tithing. But there are other things you can do. You know, there's little gifts you can buy, little children you can remember. Physically, there's work days, there's things like that, and it's easy to feel like we're busy or we are working. A lot of times we are. That's the tough thing. Is sometimes when we are at work and there's just not a lot we can do. But when we can do it, be there. It's good for us. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And the other thing is invest emotionally in your church. You want to help your church family to know you. Sometimes it's easy to clam up and think, oh, they don't understand me, I'm single. Everybody else is married. Everybody else has children. Everybody else. But we can do a lot to help our church people know us and understand us. It's not that they don't want to. Sometimes we have just clammed up and we've made it difficult for them to get to know us. If we're really honest, you know, and that becomes a reaction. And that happens a lot in relationships where one person reacts to another and it just keeps on going. Be the person that stops that reaction. If they don't know you, you can't change them. You can only change yourself. So, in church relationships, another thing is you want to be aware of being a taker, of always feeling like, again, look to yourself. You don't want to always be taking, but you also need to be willing to accept help. Like, because that's part of the relationship. That's part of them being able to invest in your life. That's good for them, it's good for you. It's a little harder for some of us to do that. You know, we kind of tend to, I'll kill my own snakes, thank you very much. It's really easy to do that, like, or to feel like I don't want to be a burden. I have a house, you know, but every other family at my church has a house. Every other wife has things that need to be done by their husbands. You know, I don't want to burden anybody else with my gutters. You know, but then you nearly fall off the roof one time and you realize dresses and the roof just don't work super well together. At a certain point, it might be better to get a little 13-year-old boy up there to clean out the gutters because he'll like it. Anyhow, another place where relationships are tried and tested and proved is in the workplace. That is a place where most of us spend a lot of time. Pay attention. The one thing I've come back to again and again in hindsight and looking at my relationships through the years, the ones that were good, the ones that were bad, the ones that I struggled with, the ones that pulled through, is to pay attention to the environment or to the atmosphere that I set in the workplace. When I walk in, am I grouchy? Am I happy? Is it good morning? Are people glad to see me? Or does everybody kind of go into a shell and all the happy chatter stop? Could it be that I have an effect? Could it be in some way I am relating? to the people in the workplace? It's just something to look at. I always try to you got to look to yourself first. And that's what God wants us to do, to change, to help us become better and to grow. A lot of us will work with women in our workplaces. You teach in school, there's other female teachers. You're working at a bakery, usually there's more females that you're working with. Bulk food stores. A lot of our workplace environments, we work with a lot of women. And women can be bickery sometimes. I think if every one of us is honest, that's kind of a tendency. But we want to strive, we really do. We want to face that weakness in our lives and strive to be a peacemaker. You know, that's coming from the other people, the people that I look at, that I admire, that I go, it's like they're the person that knows how to diffuse an argument or knows how to diffuse or just laugh off a comment that might have offended me. I watch them just laugh it off. And there was no problem. And I'm so impressed by that. And it inspires me to do better, you know, to remember not to take things too personally. They probably didn't mean it. And even if they did mean it, well, I still don't have to take it personally. I still can learn how to deal with that and let problems roll and work to build good relationships, because your workplace relationships can be some of your best relationships. They can be some of your best, but they can be where you go every single day and have to take a deep breath and try again. So what do we do with the men in our lives then? We need the men in our lives. We really do. I have been blessed the last 4 years. I've worked at a job where I've had a lot of men in my life, and they've been very good men, and I've learned an awful lot from them. I realize in hindsight I learned a lot from watching them more, even just watching how they relate with one another and stuff like that, the things that they let roll and being away from some of the female weaknesses towards the bickery stuff and things. It's been a real blessing. I have been very thankful for that. But how do we deal with that? That's going back to that verse where it says her desire will be to her husband. I feel like there is a need in every single woman's life to have male influence. But where are those lines? Because there are lines of propriety that should not be crossed. And there are there's lines of proprieties that should not be crossed. In our relationships with men, we need to make sure we show respect to them. We need to make sure we're listening to them, and we're not competing with them, and we're being aware of a strong will in us. Sometimes we think we see it our way, and it should be the way we see it, and they want it done a different way. And if you just kind of dial back a little bit and listen to what they're saying, a lot of times it makes really good sense. And we owe that to the men in our lives. We also owe that to the women in our lives, is to dial back and listen to people. The other thing you have to avoid, especially in the workplace, because a lot of times you work closely, is beware of the damsel in distress. We want to beware of emotional communication that is going to involve deep personal sharing with other men. If there's not another woman along, his wife is not along, something like that, you do want to be aware of that, because it opens certain doors for weaknesses and vulnerabilities that's not wisdom. We want to make sure we can carry ourselves modestly in our actions and our attitudes and our dress. And all at the same time, there is a friendliness and approachability that can be present. It can shake hands with a feminine reserve. They both can be present at the same time. We don't want to be women that are bold and that are tenacious, but we don't want to act scared and clam up either. We want to be sincere. We want to be honest. Friendships. Friendships are a two-way street. We have close friends. There are a lot of different levels of friendships too. And I think one thing I always have to look at is, where is this level of friendship at? Like, it's super easy to plow really deep, really fast sometimes. But we might be overwhelming somebody, overwhelming them with too much information about us right up front. And we don't know if they're trustworthy yet. Or what if they're pouring on us very quickly? It might be good for us to help them find good lines of friendship. So there are various stages of friendship. We have close friends. We have friends that are moderate friends. And we have friends that we need to be a little more careful with, maybe. We need to take a look at that honestly too. So when we have close friendships, those are the friends that are closest to us, that know us well. They know our history. We have learned that they are trustworthy. They have learned that we are trustworthy. We can do deep heart sharing with those people. Then there are your friends that we don't know so very well. We're in the process of earning trust. The friendship is in the process of being improved. We're going deeper. And the relationship is being improved. Make sure you respect those lines, and give that relationship time to grow. Give that relationship time to become. Every relationship is an opportunity to become close. But not every relationship will become very close. Then there are the relationships where we have friendships that we need to be careful with. We always want to give them opportunity for growth, but perhaps they need some boundaries. Perhaps it is a needy soul that is going to not value or your trust or your confidence. You have to be careful with that too. We don't want to be distrustful people, but sometimes it is the way it is. And some people don't have good boundaries on time. They will take a lot of your time, and you have to learn how to graciously say, look, it's time for me to go. I need to leave now. And that's an art in itself, too, is learning how to do that. We don't want to overburden people who we don't know well, but we always want to exercise hope. Always exercise hope in a relationship, and hope in people, and hope that we will grow. We will grow and they can grow. So what about enemies? That's an interesting one. Do Christians have enemies? There must be enemies out there, because Jesus said we have to love our enemies. So I hope they are not our enemies because we are doing things that are creating that. But sometimes they may just not like us very well. It may be personality conflict. We really don't know what it is. Again, examine yourself. That's always the thing I go back to again and again. I know I said it many times, but I examine myself, even in the case of enemies. Is there something I can be doing different here? Is there something I can change to make this better? I'm also open to counsel from other people, how to handle this, to make sure that they're speaking into me and helping me to handle this wisely, so that I am not causing further damage to a relationship, or something that could be a relationship, or maybe so that I'm handling it properly and knowing how to place right boundaries on that situation. And then in the end, sometimes, and this one's a little bit of a hard one for me, is we have to realize that sometimes you have to hold relationships and hold people open-handed enough that you have to let it go. Maybe it's not going to work right now, but if you extend grace to those people, if you extend grace and you extend hope and hold them open-handed, instead of tenaciously being like, we have to work this out, and realize time might take care of it. Time and love and hope and space, it might come back around again. We don't know what healing will be worked in their life, what might be worked out in your life. You just don't know, but God knows. He knows how much time we have, and yeah, you just can't expect change overnight. So that has been a blessing to me, is to learn to give people time. So, in closing, I guess, the one thing I want to know is when I die, and we don't know when that will be, but when I die, how will I be remembered? The legacy that I leave on my tombstone, will it say it's none of your business what I did? Or will it say, look at the godly influence she was in my life? How are people going to remember me when I die? Everything I do today is building my character and building my relationships. And I hope when I die, there are people that love me and that know I was a servant of God and know that I love them. And I hope the same for each of you.